Hi, I'm Billy, the Whisky Exchange's ambassador. I'm here today to have a chat with Dhavall Ghandi from the Lakes Distillery. So anyway, good afternoon, Dhavall. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Billy. Thank you for having me here. I'm doing very well, and I
Excellent.
trust you're doing well, and all the family and everybody is keeping safe.
So where are you at the moment? Are you in your work?
Yes, I'm in my office in Whisky Studio. Next door is my office, so this is my playground, I would call it, for fun. So I'm at the Lakes Distillery Whisky Studios, which is just at the Lakes Distillery. We have a small Victorian house that we converted into a whiskey experience center, and that's where my office is based and the studio is based. So as you can see me around, I've been working on various samples and prototypes for next year's bottlings, and working on a few interesting projects as well.
Excellent. So if you want to sort of start off, do you want to tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into the whiskey world and who you are and where you are now?
All right. Yeah, it's a bit of a long story, but I didn't have a straightforward path into the whiskey industry. I don't know if there is any, because I've not met one with a similar path. As from my name, Dhavall Ghandi, I grew up in India. And after finishing my high school, I moved to America for education, higher education. I studied corporate finance and economics. And, during the program, I did a short program with London School of Economics. And I came here for the program to London. And after finishing, I went to backpacking to Scotland that time. And, the first place I visited was the Scotch Whisky Experience Center, because my dad is a whiskey guy. And he said, if you're going to Scotland, make sure you go to a few distilleries if you can. And, that's where I think that was the very genesis of where the fascination started, or the spark started in a way. But long story short, I, went back to America, finished my postgraduate degree, and started working for a consulting firm in corporate finance with Ernst & Young. And I used to travel a lot. And I think that helped me a little bit go onto the exploratory journey of whiskey as well. And I was with my colleague in Kentucky. We had a client engagement. So we decided that weekend we're going to spend time in Kentucky and Louisville. And it was around 12 distilleries at that time. I'm talking about 2008 time frame, which were open. So we decided to go to all the distilleries during the weekend. And I fell in love with what was happening out there, the smell. And I vividly can smell the bottling hall of Blenton's, at Buffalo Trace. It was a Blenton's bottling hall. And, I just thought that this is something that I would like to do with my life. And of course, there are many other things that kind of led me to that. And then finally, I was at Maker's Mark. And Maker's Mark, I knocked on the door of Bill Samuel Sr., asking him, I'm a finance guy, how do I get into the whiskey industry? And I knew from day one, I wanted to become a whiskey maker, a blender. I didn't want to just work in the kind of the production side of it, or work in finance in a whiskey industry. Then I decided, the one thing I can do is to prove that I can, work into the whiskey industry, and was to enroll myself at a university, and I did Heriot-Watt. And it was a big risk for me, because at that time when I applied to Heriot-Watt for the Masters in Brewing and Distilling program, they said you are a finance guy and you are trying to do a chemical engineering, biochemistry. I don't think that's going to work out. So you are welcome to come from America and study here, but we won't give you a degree. But if you prove within a semester or two that you can handle the coursework, you can handle the concepts, we might think about giving you a degree. But for me, the decision was already made. I didn't want to sit around in boardrooms looking at Excel spreadsheet and valuation models. So I said, I would rather go. So I decided to just take the leap of faith and move to Scotland. Enrolled at Heriot-Watt, did very well. And my fascination was always whiskey. So even though I did brewing and distilling, pretty much brewing classes I missed and skipped. I was not interested. I was just focused on the whiskey side of things. And after graduation, there were not many roles in brewing distilling and whiskey making. And I wanted to just be in blending. So I decided there were two options in front of me: either leave everything I was doing and go back to America and start back in finance, or stick around. And I decided to stick around, and I joined Scottish in Newcastle, and that was Heineken at that time, taken over by Heineken, and worked as a brewer in Tadcaster Brewery. And that time, I didn't enjoy it much. I enjoyed drinking beer, but I was more passionate about making whiskey rather than brewing beer. But who knew that everything I learned would be some kind of use later on down the line. And then I kept on working in different roles at Heineken, various technical roles in Edinburgh, Netherlands. And I was at Schiphol Airport, and I got a call from a recruiting agency that they were looking for someone to join a whiskey making team as a blender role. And not one, but believe me, it was three companies that had ongoing vacancies. Applied to all three. I got offer from two, and I decided to go with Macallan because I loved sherry whiskeys a lot. Even before I decided to become a whiskey maker, there's something about those whiskeys fascinated me. There was a pull for me. So and Macallan does amazing research on sherry cask and maturation. And also at that time, while I was at Heineken, I did my chartered scientist degree in distilling. And my area of focus of research was cask and maturation. So it kind of fit very well. I started with Macallan as a whiskey maker, and I was at Easter Elke's house, worked there, and then worked back in Glasgow more on the wood and sherry and maturation side of things, and also putting together the usual blends. And, what happened was I was trying, I think this is a kind of fundamental point that happened to me, and it occurred to me that I was trying to be like other blenders. I was trying to probably copy or do what they were doing, the way they were thinking. And I was thinking Scotch whiskey was from a box, but at that time I always believe in diversity of thought, and taking concepts. I'm a big reader. I love reading. So I wanted. There were a lot of questions in my head I wanted answers to. I wanted to. What happens if you make this change? Why can't we apply a concept from winemaking into this? Or why can't I take some brewing concept? Why can't I take concepts from perfuming industry? So those questions were bubbling up in my head, and I needed answers. And I needed a platform where I could try out all those things and find answers to what I was looking for. And I think, Macallan was a great place. But for me, there it was more about maintaining certain bottlings, maintaining a style, while I wanted to evolve it in my head. I wanted my understanding to bring all these different things into the play, because for me, whiskey is a much more holistic approach rather than looking just from a blending perspective or looking just from a cask perspective or a distiller's perspective. I think it's an additive process. We create, enhance, deepen, broaden flavors across the whole spectrum. So for me, a platform was required. And at that right time, I was approached by our current chairman, Dr. Alan Rutherford, who is the chairman of Lakes and Compass Box. So I knew him through a friend of mine, and he called me up and said, I'm working at this boutique whiskey company in England, and we want a whiskey maker to come and, look at how things are and see what we can be as a company, as a brand, as a product. And we also want you to create a house style. Now, I saw there were two things. I was working at, one of the biggest names in the whiskey business. I loved it. Amazing people, amazing company to work with. And then there was this unknown company, which was a big risk, where I didn't know anything, but it allowed me to get complete access to do whatever I needed to do. And one of the things Dr. Rutherford promised me is, if you join us, we'll give you complete carte blanche. You do whatever you need to do to get us to that vision. So that's where my story started. So I started with Lakes in 2016. And it has been a long journey, and it's been a fascinating things. And I have made a lot of tweaks and changes, and I was trying to find answers. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I do at Lakes and what we are trying to do at Lakes. What is the philosophy? What is the style? The style is very much sherry-led and not very dry, woody sherry. I think more elegant, restrained sherry, much more complex in nature, full of flavor, and of course, it's wood forward. Now, there are people who think, the distillate character is not there, but there are styles. I think our style, the style I love drinking and style I love creating, and that's why I love Macallan. I still love Macallan, is because it's more on the wood side. For me, the whole process starts at the very end of the process. When I came to Lakes, the first thing I was asked, okay, what are you trying to do? And I said, my plan is to work on the end side of the process, what I wanted to create from a flavor perspective, what single malts I wanted to create, and then work backwards. I didn't want to take the traditional approach about, okay, we make, and that's the style of spirit. Now let's find the cask that work better. In fact, I wanted to create a very elegant, complex, and flavor-packed style of single malt, which was sherry-led. And then I worked backwards to make all the changes in the process that allowed me to completely unlock different flavor profiles. So I'll tell you a little bit about how things worked out. So first of all, with sherry, usually in the industry, everybody says, oh, we use sherry cask. But as you can see, I've been working on a product for next year, and there are different spectrums you can achieve. There's no just one sherry cask, because I have 26 different types of Oloroso cask, and I'm talking about 26 different types. In a way, I have different oak profiles, I have different seasoning times, I have different toasting levels, I have different wood sourcing strategies. Some have much more air seasoning, much more longer, some are much more shorter. The sizes are different. I have bodega cask, which are much more better for the lighter, certain characters that I want to enhance, certain distillate characters, and then I have more seasoned cask, which can also bring in a very different flavor profile to the mix. So those are the styles of sherry that I wanted to work with. Now, the one thing I wanted to do was create a new make spirit that was much more robust, because I think a lot of new distilleries make this mistake, is they make the new make spirit very light and fruity. There's nothing wrong with that. But what happens is when you have a lighter spirit and then you try to put very heavy, intense cask on it, they get overburdened by the wood and the oak and they become very, very oaky. You need to have a little bit of robustness, a little bit of oiliness, creaminess in the new make spirit that allows you to hold certain flavors coming from sherry cask or much more intense, French oak or Spanish oak cask. So what I started working was on the new make spirit style. I wanted to do a blank slate. So the whole new make spirit that you taste today is completely different than what we made in, back in 2015 when we started. It is much more robust, and I call it the 3-tier architecture. And there are two concepts I borrowed, one from the perfume industry, one from my brewing background at Heineken. So what I started doing was I wanted to create something that had the body, creaminess, the heaviness. Also, I wanted a little bit of waxy character in it. And when I'm talking about waxy character, I'm not talking about something like more like a klein leash. But sometimes, you have an orange or lemon. But if you take lemons or limes and you can nose them, there is a bit of waxiness on it, on the skin. I wanted to bring that into the profile, because that waxiness with sherry will go in, on a different way. And then I wanted top notes. And I wanted fruity top notes that were elegant, but that could develop into something even more profound later on. Because I think the other concept that people miss is people think, oh, I love your new make spirit, but new make spirit is not something you're going to sell. You're going to sell the whiskey. It's how the new make spirit develops and converts. That is what more interesting and important rather than the new make spirit itself. So then I took this concept of aroma triangle from perfuming industry, where they use the top notes, middle notes, and base notes. And then I started working on a 2-year project to completely identify the right yeast types that will give me those 3 different flavor profiles in different buckets. And we pretty much tried every yeast available in the marketplace that I could find. I could get my hands on. We did almost 158 different trials of just using different combination of yeast, different ways, different types to create those things. And finally, I found a heritage yeast, which was used in the Scotch industry, but we stopped using it because they were poor yields. So the yield I could get with a normal yeast and strain would be around 400, 405, 410 liters of alcohol per ton of barley. With this heritage yeast, I got 300 liters of alcohol per ton of barley. But it gave me a very distinctive waxy character, that heaviness I was looking for. I got that in that heritage yeast. So I got that into that. Then started the process about how do I want to create different flavor profiles. So what I started doing was a very complex way of brewing. We brew different washes have been brewed with different yeast in different combination on different days during the week. So that's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, there is a different combination of yeast. Tuesday, Thursday, there is a different combination of yeast that goes in. And at the end of the week, so I have this new mix spirit characters. So I have the lighter style. I have the kind of the heavier, oilier, creamy, sort of waxy style that is blended at the end of the week to create a super complex 3-tiered architecture. And then that is put into cask. So the blending for me starts, even before it goes into the cask. So that was a new make spirit kind of thing that we work on. The fermentation times, I changed it. Historically, we had very short fermentation and some very, very long fermentation. I wanted to make it completely consistent. And I wanted that little bit of yogurty texture in the new make spirit that you could get, a sweetness. So increase the fermentation time to 96 hours. I could go 100 hours. There was no problem. But I think during my trials, I found something that was between 92 and 96 worked very well from the distillate I was trying to get. So that was the fermentation part of the thing. Then changed the distillation side of things. Ran it a little bit more slowly. The cut points are slightly more narrow to allow me to capture those fruity elements, and also a little bit of mouthfeel character from the second cut. So change the cut points of the spirit to give me that new mix spirit at the very end of the process. So like I said, a lot of people started early, first stage. I started at the very end of the process. Now with the malt, I want to keep things very, very consistent. I appreciate there are a lot of different philosophies out there, different approaches. Some people want to go field and they want to look at one farm and then they want to go through the distillate. Fine, I appreciate that. Like I said earlier on, my style is more dependent on the post-distillation side of things and fermentation to distillation rather than the malt. So I want very, very consistent malt profile. So we use Laureate currently. Unpeated, so all the legs that's been made is unpeated. Now the fun begins because after the new make spirit is blended in the different proportions, I start working around with different casks. And for me, sherry is my whole focus. I'm a student of sherry cask maturation. That's what my research is all about. That's what I keep on studying. And I think there's so much to study just in one cask category that it's going to take a lifetime. But my focus is all finding nuances of character and playing around with those. So if you look at the Whiskey Makers Reserve, our release number 1, 2, and 3, they pretty much have the same cask makeup, but they are the nuances. So, I have a couple of glasses here, and I know the front one, which I was nosing earlier, they have more to do with, some are more on the dry ginger note. I love that character in the sherry cask, and I love that from Macallan. Dry ginger character. Some are more focused on the spice, wood spices, a little bit of nutmeg, cinnamon. And then some are more focused on the dry foods, more like sultanas, sun-dried raisins. So those characters, there are wild figs, much more heavier, deeper characters. So, something that here I have is more on the richer character. And then, I try to go very, very detailed about everything from where the oak came from, all the way till the seasoning times, to the toasting levels, to what wine have been seasoned in. And I use all different kinds of sherry cask. I have Manzanilla, Fino, Amontillado, Palo Cortado, you name it. All are there to allow me to create this wide spectrum of flavors that I can use and blend it very creatively to, express different ideas and thoughts and flavor profiles. So that's where the maturation comes in. It's pretty much sherry, but I also love port. I think port casks are, extremely great. And I start with, port from a port, barriques to hogsheads to, I have big puncheons as well. Some are very, very old. Uh, I always seem to think, this is just me personally, I don't know if I have heard anybody else, that wood has a bit of memory in it. Yeah, every wood, every cask, every oak that you find has a bit of memory of what it was there before in the cask, where it came from, where the growth happened, where was it dry. That all memory is contained. And as a whiskey maker, I'm trying to explore and bring out those memories as flavors and characters. I mean, that's I think the ultimate goal. And with oak, you cannot force a whiskey. Like, I call myself a cask whisperer, for a lack of better term, because what you have to understand is, what does a whiskey want you to do? Does it want to go in a direction of more spice? Does it want to go into more elegant? Does it want to go into more? And all I can do is nudge it in the right direction rather than force it into a style. So what I found is, I think simplicity and depth is what all about from maturation. So I only use 3 casks, pretty much, oaks: American oak, Spanish oak, and French oak in my whole core makeup. So any whiskey maker's reserve that you see are pretty much 3 oaks. I have a lot of Hungarian, Romanian. I have all kinds of oak, different casks. But those are the fundamental oaks that I like to play with, because I always think I'm after the classic. I'm after the essence. I'm not trying to create a novelty. Okay, one cask from English oak. Okay, fine, it gets a buzz. I think for me, it's more about that long-term classic character. So I use 3 oaks, and then I use 3 sherries as well. The primarily everything for lakes that I like to create, the backbone is always Oloroso sherry. I also use a lot of PX casks. PX casks allowed me to focus more on the mouthfeel and certain heavier nuances. And I also use Pinot cask. Pinot doesn't give me much wood forward character, but it enhances certain distillate character that I want. It allows me to kind of bring that into the play as well. So if you look at, we have Whiskey Maker 3 has cream sherry cask. And cream sherry casks were pretty much one of the reasons, because there was one of that drier character that I wanted to bring in, which was not, Oloroso style, not PX style, but something different to mix to add more complexity to it. Now, we do fill bourbon. I think bourbon casks are great, but the focus is always on pretty much, sherry cask and port cask. There's a lot of other casks that I use as well. I have orange wine cask. I have other different, wine casks that allow me to add different nuances and flavor. Now, one of the concepts, what I think I wanted to do was a concept of élevage, which I read about it a long time ago when I was at Macallan. I was reading in a magazine, something that the French producers and cognac producers do. And it was élevage means to raise, to bring up. It's to nurture, I would call it in my way. And something that I practice, everything, all the whiskey that I go have been, I focus on the process of élevage. And what I do is I start with a core thing. So if I look at these 2 characters that I have in front of me, mostly, so this one is much more on the richer dry fruit, like Sultana's raisins, and this is much more on the ginger spice one. So that's fine. I'm not going to blend them out and lose those characters. So I might start with the heavier character, then I might put it into move the whole liquid out into a different cask. Let's say it might be an Oloroso made up of Spanish oak to give me certain spiciness and the ginger character on it. Then I think I might move that into a French oak cask, which will give me a little bit of cloves and aromatic character coming through. So all the liquid have been moved around to add layers of complexity. And it's nothing that I invented or anything. It's, it's been done in the cognac industry for generations. And I think that's a wonderful technique, because what you're doing is you are effectively taking each cask or each parcel, and you are trying to build on different flavor profile. You are trying to create layers of flavor over time. Of course, time is always the thing that you require as a whiskey maker. but those concepts make it fun. So it's a concept of mathematics as well. I like to use that. I studied mathematics. I have a degree in mathematics. So for me, taking certain mathematical concepts, whether it's the golden ratio or whether it's the Fibonacci sequences, I have used those certain formula that is available in the nature to create certain whiskey characters and style. If you look at around us, the nature is mathematics. It's pure mathematics, whether it's the amount of the number of leaves on a tree, or the way the grass grows, or the way the flower blooms. Everything has a mathematical formula attached to it. And I'm not saying that whiskey making is formulaic or it is more based on a formula, but you can take those concepts and make and evolve the whiskey. And I think that pretty much takes me to where I think, you mentioned about where the world of whiskey is going. I think we all love whiskey. And I think from a consumer perspective as well, and as a maker perspective as well, it is time now to start taking all these different influences, the way we make things. I'm experimenting with, the amphoras that is used in the wine industry. I have tried experimenting with new mix spirit that is kind of laid to rest in earthen pots made up of earth, and that kind of gives it that mellow texture. And that coming from that, I grew up in India, and most of the Indian homes used to have a matka, which is an earthen pot where they put water in it. And no matter the time of the year, daytime, where is sunlight, you always get very cool, satisfying, soft water, drinking water out of that. And I wanted to experiment that with the new experience. I'm using that. I'm also using concrete tanks, again, coming from a wine industry, to create different nuances and textures for the new mix spirit. The other concept that I think was worthwhile, and initially when I came here at Lakes, and something I had about slow reduction techniques. So again, that's coming from Calvados and other winemaking, where you are reducing something very slowly over time. A lot of people reduce, but what they do is, you have 70% alcohol, and then you pump up, a big pumps up, flows goes down. You put the spirit in shock because you have cold water going through it. So we used to reduce pretty much like a normal reduction technique that's used everywhere else. And I wanted to experiment with slow reduction because I had read about it, and there is science to it. You can cause esterification by very, very slow trickling down water. So at Lakes, when we make our new mix spirit, and the reduction doesn't happen in an hour or something, we do reduction at 8 liters per hour. That is trickle down reduction for a company. 8 liters an hour. So it's just kind of trickling down, and that slowly, it brings the strength from 70% all the way to 64, 58. And it works. And I'll tell you, initially my team was very resistant. The guys are like, oh, it just takes too much time and it doesn't make any difference. And actually, what I did was, I think the proof is in the pudding. So we did the trials. We did a blind taste test, a triangle test. We got all the guys in blind. Said, okay, pick the one. Everyone picked the one that was slowly reduced as a much more holistic, flavorful spirit. So, there is so much we can do to elevate our experience of the spirit we all love. That's whiskey. And I think those are a couple of examples, that what we are doing. I'm working on different kind of techniques from oak looking. So I think, everybody is going on different things. And right now, I was just reading about something I was discussing with my team yesterday. We read someone was publishing where, things were harvested, or, what was the temperature. I think, fine, all information is helpful. I think transparency is the way to go. But I think what I feel is, we need to be more transparent with the areas that are actually creating those flavor profiles. And I think that's where I would like to be more in tune with. Why not talk about, different toasting? Why not talk about different styles of sherry? What does they bring to the table? how do you blend? I think people are still thinking blending is something that happens just for blended whiskey. But I think, how do you creatively put together a single malt? Because ultimately that's a blend as well. How do we get more flavor profile? So anyways, that's what we are trying to do. And that's the work we are working on.
Well, it's one of these marvelous things about lakes. I visited years and years ago, just after you opened, before your time, and things were starting out, and there were some ideas. And ever since you've arrived, there's been this switch. And you come from a very traditional background. Macallan are one of the most traditional distillers out there. And well, although you now have the incredible Teletubby land like new distillery, which is incredible marvel of engineering. So, but you've taken that sort of very traditional background and then just rolled in all these new concepts. And it's one of the things I'm seeing quite frequently in the world of English whiskey, is that you're freed from these sort of like traditions that you have in Scotland to just jump on and just develop stuff. Have you found that move from south of the border has helped, or has it hindered? Or
no, actually, Billy, it's in fact the other way around. Actually, when I came to Lakes, I think there was probably, I can say that, I think there was not a strategy of moving forward. What do we want to be? What do we stand for? I think there was no one with that kind of idea behind, okay, how do we create something compelling? I think everybody is trying to create whiskey, but are we creating something that is moving us? A whiskey can be very ordinary. When I'm looking at steps, if it's just ordinary and it's a good whiskey, fine. It doesn't, get me moving. But can we create something compelling? And in fact, when I came here, the decision that I made once I took over the whiskey operations bit, one of the decisions I made was everything we're going to do is Scotch style. So we follow the SWA rules. Even though we are in England, we want to do everything SWA style. But there are nuances. There are interpretation of what we can bring in. There's so much room for improvement. There's so much room to play with. You think about just sherry cask. Even if you just take Oloroso, I have 26 different types of Oloroso cask. Can you imagine the flavor combinations I can create and play around with? That's what nuances are with Whiskey Maker Reserve 1, 2, and 3. So I think it helps. It avoids. I'm not worrying. I respect tradition. I want to take tradition, but I also want to have my own influences about it. And it goes, Billy, I grew up in India, and a lot of Indian cuisine from the north of India has been influenced by Afghani cuisine, Persian cuisine. We had so many different invaders from all over because of the way the region is. And all those influences from different cultures, people, thought process brought in this explosion of flavor. And I think that is the time, where the whiskey industry is heading. We have amazing things happening around the world, whether friends at Milk and Honey, or whether friends in Japan, or whether friends in Australia. Everybody's trying to find out their individual things, what makes them tick, what drives them, what inspires them, and try to put that into something they want to create. So I think whiskey, for me, it has always been on a spectrum. I think it's wrong to put it like art or science. I think there's art, science, design that are different, multidimensional. But for me, whiskey making has always been more art focused, and I think that is where it's going. I think our approach can be scientific, fine. I mean, I respect that there are amazing, scientists, some, really legendary whiskey makers who come from a science background. But I think I approach more as art, and I call myself a lousy scientist and a careless artist. That's what I am. I would rather use science to push my art and to challenge my art rather than the other way around. So I think I use science. Whenever sometimes I want to go more deeper, I'll get, GC analysis, cask extractives. But most of the time, it's all about feeling and personality and emotions. I think the change I feel is there is going to be more and more emotional, bringing more emotional into the play that will connect the whiskeys. Because I think ultimately, whether, it's single malt or blended whiskey or any alcoholic drink, it's all about conversation between the maker and the consumer, conversation between maker and a customer. And whiskey just becomes a trigger in a way that we kind of connect to ideas.
Now that concept, the conversation with the customer, that's another thing I've seen develop a lot over the last sort of 10, 20 years. It used to be whiskey was a thing, it was on a shelf, someone bought it, they drank it, they liked it. But now people want to know who made it. They want to speak to the people who made it. So, years ago, if you were your current position, you'd be hidden away in your office, you'd never get out. But these days, if I go to a whiskey show and the Lakes are there, you're there front and center on the stand, talking to people. Are you seeing people sort of increase what they want to know? Are they digging in deeper, or are they just talking about flavor? What are people interested in?
I think you are absolutely right. I think that's a change which I see, and I think there's changes for good. I think some companies have become very cold. There's no human element to it, and I think the moment you put a human face to it, an element to it, you bring personality, you bring certain ideas and emotion. Now, the way we make lakes won't be the same way if I wasn't there. Yeah, if there was someone else, they would make it some different way. They will have their own interpretations, own creativity to it. What makes the current liquid is probably my conditioning, my growth, where I grew up, my mother taking me through those streets in India where there were all this masala and spice shops where I could breathe and get in all the spice, the vibrant colors about people's clothing in India. Different clothes are very vibrant colors. It's all these influences as a child, as a teenager, as a youth. This is what is art about. Art is about bringing whatever you have gone into and manifesting into something amazing. So I think that's where human element comes into play, and that's how you can connect. I think if you try to be very cold and like a big company face and there's no person behind it, that's why people like to know that, because I personally feel that you understand the whiskey even more better after you understand and talk to the maker. So for example, our good friend John Glaser at Compass Box, if you understand John's and if you listen to John at a show or something like that, you will understand why Compass Box has those beautiful labels. Why are they compelling in that way? And I think that's where human element is important. I think that's the change I'm also seeing. And I think going forwards from shows perspective, I think it will become more and more like those wine producers, some wine shows where it's more intimate between the winemaker, probably unlabeled bottles. You're pouring different wines and just talking about the wine. I think liquid and the people will do the talking. How you make it, what is your thought process, how are you doing it? I think that is going to be probably quite fundamental going forward.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that we see more and more is, as you say, people digging in, want to understand the why. It used to be just one note, does it taste nice? But now it's why have you chosen to do this? Explain why. And John Glaser is the perfect person to mention. Every time I speak to John, I come away with a reading list of new stuff I have to go out and read, new stuff I have to learn about. And just you say, it ties into that philosophy of making and the art of whiskey and creation, and it all being a conversation in the end and coming all together. It's exciting times for whiskey. It really is, and it's projects like this and the way that you make whiskey are really pushing it.
Yeah, I think it's exciting, and there's so much to learn. And I think we need to now go back as makers. We need to stop being masters and start becoming students. Start becoming having that. I think it was Shunru Suzuki who wrote a book, Beginner's Mind. We need to start having that beginner's mind again into our process that we love so much. We need to go back and let's become students again. And let's start asking questions, being curious about why that happens. Okay, what if I do that? I think we have been too safe so far. I think now it's time to little bit expand the knowledge as well and move the world of whiskey forward. I think that's where I call it, I think as all makers, we need to have that beginner's mind again.
Yeah, that's it. Again, the wonderful world of whiskey, as we say, it never stops changing. It goes round and round and round and round. As you say, going back to the beginning, reimagining. It's exciting times ahead. Anyway, we've had chat for ages, so I'll let you get back to your blending and making beautiful things for the future. Thank you very much for having a chat today. And yeah, I say I've got my Whiskey Wakers #1 here. I didn't drink all of this myself. My whiskey club and I went through this a little while back. And I've tried your next couple of releases. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens next. Some really interesting.
Have you tried, Billy? Have you tried #3 yet?
I have a little sample of #3 next door. I haven't had a go at that one yet. #1 and #2. I sat in the tasting with you at the beginning of lockdown and tried the number.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So #3 is it's on my list for my big tasting list for the week. So I'm looking forward to that. So.
No. Thank you. Thank you for your time and appreciate having me on this virtual event. Thank you.
Cool. I'll see you soon, I'm sure.
Thanks. Bye-bye.